Greetings and welcome to the Pure Report. I'm your host, Rob Ludeman. It's time to bring the orange, and I am thrilled in studio today to have a good friend, colleague, advisor to the program, and just all-around good guy, Sean Rosemarin. Hey, it's great to have you in here. What do you think of this place? Pretty good, huh?
It looks awesome. My first time on Pure Report video, so thank you for the invitation, and looking forward to a good discussion today.
Yeah, you're a longtime audio guest, first-time video, which I'm thrilled that you reached out and let me know you're in town, hailing from Vancouver, from up north. Mm-hmm. We've had you on for segments in the past where you talked about a blog series you did, Letters to Your 25-Year-Old Self. We do your annual predictions every year for the last 4 years. And probably what stands out most in my memory is when you just joined Pure, and about 3 weeks in, you set up a meeting and kind of came and talked to me about your thoughts on the podcast and what to do more of and maybe what to do a little bit less of. That was really great.
Yeah, I've been a long-term podcast advocate. Being someone who has 3 kids, spends a lot of time at soccer games and hockey games and different kinds of practices and running between different events. Podcasts are probably the number one way in which I stay up to date on what's going on in the marketplace, and always been a huge fan of the Pure Report. And yeah, I think we're leading the way here. So great job by you and the team.
Yeah, definitely kudos to the creative team for getting this set up. It is super exciting, and thank you for your involvement over the years and for coming in today. I just want to dive in because I think we have a really great conversation today, particularly around customers contending with managing workflows in their environment. I mean, we'll distill it down and that'll be in the title and in the description, but there's a reason that we're talking about it. But I want to start with, we've got a segment we're doing, which is stat of the episode. And as we're recording this, some of the Gartner MQ things have just come out. And once again, Pure named as a leader, right, in the leadership quadrant for, we look at that as, well, the 12th time that we've done that. But besides that stat, I think what's really interesting and stands out is over the last couple of years, Gartner actually changed the way they describe the storage category and actually use the term platform. Why is that significant to you?
Well, look, I mean, having been in the IT world for coming up on 30 years, I think we spent a lot of time talking about products. Mm-hmm. I think everybody likes to talk about technology. This feature, this product, this box, that box. But at the end of the day, what we've seen is the only way to actually get value out of any of this, the only way in which this actually adds something tangible to the way in which your company operates, is if that technology can essentially evolve your people and your process.
Yeah.
So actually make life better for your people, make their jobs more all-encompassing, more valuable in terms of day-to-day, but also the processes, removing the unnecessary steps along the way. And I think that Gartner's movement to this platform quadrant fundamentally says if you're going to treat storage as a platform, if you're going to treat it as a function of your business, and holistically what kind of value can be delivered across that gambit, it's a much healthier way to look at it as someone going into a purchase decision than what box should you buy and what are the features of that box, because you may or may not ever deploy those features. You may or may not ever use those features. What effect is it going to have as you go through that transformation? And then what impact is it going to bring to your company?
Yeah, and I think it's a difficult transition from where we've been in IT for so many years, right? You can go back decades and decades, and what gets infrastructure teams excited is the actual product and the features that get made into it. And as a marketeer, it's something that we've had to learn, right? Doing marketing here at Pure Storage. Yes, we have to talk about the things that are exciting in the product, and certainly our engineering teams build great capabilities into the product. And there are conversations we need to have with the right people in an organization. But when you look at the decision by a company to invest in something holistically, end to end, it really does now become more a platform conversation because it is really all about the data, right? It's not about the storage
100%.
widget. Yeah.
I mean, look, if you look at the number one ride-hailing app, it's not about the fact that it's a cool app. It's not about the fact that it's yet another thing to install on your phone. It actually took the process of taking a taxi and made it more efficient for everyone. right? We can all remember the old days of taking a taxi where you called the company, you stayed on hold, you told them where you wanted to go, you waited awkwardly at the door while to see if the taxi would arrive. You got in the cab, you had to tell them where to go, sometimes give them directions, and then take a receipt at the end of it on thermal paper, which you may or may not even have when you get back to your end destination. If you fast forward and you look at the platform for ride hailing, that's what really changed. By the way, if I look at the cloud, it wasn't about a better box or a bigger box or a more powerful box. It was about the fact that actually the workflow for allocating and provisioning and managing a workload, the operating model, fundamentally changed. Same thing with CRM. It was about bringing and transforming the sales process. If I look at ITSM, right, the leading vendor in that space, it was about changing the process of how you do that. And there's no reason why that shouldn't mature into storage the same way that it has across cloud, ITSM, et cetera.
Yeah, no, that's great. I love your analogy on the ride hailing and the app because, again, I used to remember getting back from long business trips. And the thing I hated most was having to actually tell the cab where to go to get to my house. I just wanted to sleep, and I just wanted the car to stop to let me wake up. And now we have that capability, right, to do that because it's based on the data that is there. I'll transition in from a little bit of the conversation on the platform and having a platform mindset to talk really, and we brought it up at the top, around workflow optimization or workflow efficiency. Why are we talking about that here? Why have you gone into and done some analysis around this and that we're actually spending 40 minutes on a podcast talking about workflows that come? It sounds mundane, right? Workflows. But are we talking about the way businesses bring products to life or the way that they operate? Like, is that what we're really getting into here?
Yeah, it's in my role in R&D, looking after customer engineering. I spend a lot of time talking to our customers about how they're using the technology that they've acquired from us. And obviously what else they would like to see from us, helping our engineering teams better understand what's going on from a market dynamic, industry dynamic. But what kind of came to the top was we kept on hearing a similar message, which is Pure has changed the way we look at storage, the way we manage data, the way our teams operate. And it kind of really built a big concept in my head of, okay, tell me more. Tell me how we fundamentally have changed the game for you. And what came up was this construct of a lot of these customers in their prior lives, it wasn't one thing. It wasn't like one particular part of their storage environment was broken. It was, as they defined it, death by 1,000 cuts, right? And it wasn't, kind of getting back to my ride-hailing analogy, it wasn't the fact that taking one taxi was hard. It was the fact that if you're a business person who's on the road and you're taking taxis multiple times per week, that death by 1,000 cuts just ends up being a major productivity drain. So we built out this model to kind of talk our customers through and kind of capture, this really came from our customers, where are the individual workflows? What are the individual processes where you're seeing value from Pure? And how would you define that value in terms of what you're getting today versus what you may have been struggling with in the past?
And still based around the risk factors that we're usually used to, right? We're talking about time to deploy and day 0, day 1, day 2 types of issues. You're talking about operating within budget, that types of things. And then I'm sure there's certainly a cyber component to this as well, right?
100%.
Along with everything.
So when you think about processes or processes, depending on what part of the world you're in, people like to focus on cost savings. And yes, there's cost savings in optimizing processes. But ultimately, the number one biggest motivator of change today is risk. And risk is becoming a bigger and bigger factor. Because in the IT world, the concept of IT currency, so how current is my environment versus the best practice standards or, putting a patch on for the latest CVE, that IT currency job is often overlooked. But it is a significant line of responsibility for most IT teams to ensure that everything that has been deployed and everything that will be deployed is in line with the standards that are accepted by the business to best protect its assets. And so ultimately risk comes first. And then, we want cost, absolutely, but we also want to save time. We want to save time so we can say yes to more projects, so that the available bandwidth of the entire team based on the people, process, and technology is expanded to be able to support more for the business without any incremental cost.
When I hear you say some of those things, what stands out to me is that teams are dealing with a lot of different variabilities. And so the vendor that is going to be able to remove or eliminate those variabilities, right? You talked about putting in a patch to manage a CVE and thinking about doing migrations of data, right? All these different tasks. It would be so much easier, let's use your taxi analogy again too, where you have those variabilities. Why not have the vendor take care of those things for you? Why not have the vendor it's part of the solution. Hey, it's part of the platform.
100%. If you know that I always want certain things, or I want a list or a menu of particular blueprints that I constantly consume, then how come I have to go in and configure all those manually every time?
Yeah.
Right? And so when Pure looked at what we were already delivering in terms of making storage intuitive and making storage a more productive part of the environment, it kind of jumped off the page that, hey, if we're going to talk about platform, we got to talk about people and process. And we got to be really clear and precise about where in Pure's offering is it that we are fundamentally driving efficiency in the process side of the equation.
Yeah, and we just finished the 15 Architectural Decisions series, publishing that with JD and Andrew. It's a consistency that comes up across a lot of the different hallmarks of how we built the portfolio, and certainly evolved into SLA-based Evergreen One types of solutions that we could go offer customers. But let's double click a little bit around the provisioning and the resource allocation. I mean, it can go to things simply about how long it takes to set things up, what people, right? When we were talking about this in our kind of pre-brief, you say, well, resource allocation and provisioning. To me, that's a time thing. And that's a people thing. Do I have the number of people there to set it up? How complex is it then to go and to do that, right? If you invest in a lot of infrastructure, how good is it if it takes 6 to 9 months to get it actually up and running in production? You basically wasted money on what you're spending. So to me, there's a lot of different factors that go into the provisioning and the allocation. What did you hear from a lot of these customers that you spoke to about this area?
Yeah, so you bring up an interesting point, right? The old joke used to be that contracts were 3 years long because it took you a year to actually get it deployed.
That's right.
It took you a year to then use what you deployed, and it took you a year to then go through the process of figuring out what you were going to deploy
Plan the next migration, right? Yeah.
So when we talked about customers, what they told us was that the status quo prior to their world with Pure, it was taking them roughly 5 to 10 business days to provision a net new workload. This is not, by the way, installing the storage system when it comes on the pallet.
Yeah.
This is day 2.
Right.
Okay? But it took them 5 to 10 business days. Now, how did that break down? Well, first they had to do capacity and feasibility checks. So you can imagine you got to talk to various people. Remember, this is people in process again,
right,
to figure out within the storage admin team what kind of capacity exists, what's feasible, what's available at certain tiers. Then you need to have a technical architecture review to make sure that whatever you were putting on that environment wouldn't have any effects, noisy neighbor effects or otherwise on what was there. Then you had to go get approval and budget. Someone had to sign off on that increased expenditure. Then there was a design configuration and setup. And then there was testing and handover. Now remember, each of these resource allocations was 5 to 10 business days. And if you break that down, that roughly cost, $15,000, $20,000. Now what's interesting here is this is just provisioning a single workload.
That's one, right? And you provision hundreds or tens of workloads.
Back to death by 1,000 cuts. Right? But what really jumped off the page was this concept of InfoSec risk, this concept of what kind of risk was in this process. And that's when we kind of unearthed all this interesting stuff. So in the process of going through provisioning and resource allocation and all this workflow, we're sharing capacity data. We're potentially sharing volume data, volume names, sizes, capabilities of that data. We're potentially looking at security standards that may or may not be part of that existing environment, and now there's new security standards that have to be put in place during design and configuration, depending on who configured it. might have misconfiguration, might have open LUNs, might have unencrypted volumes. And then even testing and handover. Has all of this been adequately captured in a blueprint so that that environment can be easily created in the future? These were all gaps, and they're largely people and process. But it kind of jumped off that, wow, we should be given a heck of a lot more respect to the IT teams out there that deal with this complexity every single day. And Pure's platform message really does come in at the perfect time to help make it simpler to get what you need out of storage.
And I think it's frustrating for some of these roles too, to have to keep doing this over and over again, right? It's like a hamster wheel of just having to do the same things and all the risk that goes with that, as well as some of the exposures that you talk about. And it's really interesting that you bring up the exposure of the volumes, the LUNs, and things getting out to where they maybe shouldn't be.
Well, and remember how repetitive this is.
Yeah, right.
Right? And I mean, there's lots of analogies and corollaries you can draw to life. But for instance, if we take an airplane, so before the plane takes off, the pilot and the co-pilot go through a check, and it's a checklist. And I'm not a pilot, so I'm being a little liberal in my understanding here. But let's say there's 50 things in that list that have to be checked before the plane can take off. Well, the first time you go through the check, you're very diligent about making sure every single item is checked in that order. But, as humans, we try to get efficient.
Yeah.
And so maybe the third or fourth or fifth time, you're kind of like, yeah, I already checked that, don't need to go and line it up. Now, the planes have gotten around this by actually randomizing what gets checked. So the order changes so that you can't predict what's going to come next.
Yeah.
But in storage, think of how many times we're doing these tasks.
Yeah.
Think of how many times we're taking the original recipe, the original guidelines, and then we're saying, I know how to do that.
Yeah.
I know how to do that. It's a little like when I put together IKEA furniture, only to realize at the end, you now have 4 screws left over.
I missed a step. Yeah. I missed step 2. I missed step 3.
And so this is actually a really important area where customers have come to us and said, help us, right? And if you look at what we've been able to do with Fusion and just the overall initial vision of taking a business card
right.
and then a tent card and saying, how can I make this provisioning and resource allocation task simple? And then you take that original ethos of the flip card, tent card, and you move that to Fusion, and now you say, actually, you're not going to have to worry about going through that checklist. We will capture all the elements of what you want deployed as you want it deployed, and we'll make sure it's deployed exactly the same way every time.
Yeah, we're taking that philosophy of the tent card to the day 2 issues, right? The day 2 challenges that you talked about when you're adding in the capabilities of Fusion, of that workload automation, of that automated deployment for workflows. Yeah, it's a very good analogy.
Yeah, and it's not just about setting up the storage. It's also about making sure it's secure. Because remember, every single day we're adding new steps, new capabilities to make sure those workloads are secure. You want to make sure it's configured the same way every time. And that's hard to do when you're counting on a human to make sure that they're following a checklist.
Yeah. Well, we abstract a lot of those things too. Again, that was another thing that came out in the 15 architectural decisions discussions, where the amount of things that we take care of under the covers for customers, and again, maybe that's more in deployment, but also I would argue in operation as well, where there's just things that you can't get to because we don't want you to get to. Why would you want to access all of that gory log data, right? Go use the monitoring and management that we provide on top of it. Why go mess around with logs, right? That's time consuming, that's mundane. We take care of it for you, but it even gets better when you add in Fusion and the workload automation and the workload orchestration, all these great capabilities that truly help people operate as a platform and
100%.
not a piece of storage. Yeah. Let's hit number 2, because I'm not surprised that this one came up on your list after talking to a bunch of customers using Pure. Quite simply, performance management and monitoring. And I made notes after all these, it's kind of what's the question in my head. And it's basically, okay, we've deployed our workloads. We're supporting parts of the business. How's it running? What's it doing? How do we know about what it's doing, right?
Well, it's interesting, right? Because storage only exists to capture the data being essentially collected and gathered by critical applications.
Yeah.
But all these applications, we have SLAs. Our customers, the IT professional has an SLA, the business owner has an SLA to keep that application running, not just available, but actually performing as per spec. Well, every time we put a new application onto that storage environment, there's a bunch of work, once again, death by 1,000 cuts, to set up, configure, and on an ongoing basis, continue to keep that pathology or those metrics available. So that in the event something goes wrong, or in the event that you have to report up, hey, what's the performance of this application? What has been the uptime? How much data has been impacted? In the case of a breach, what was exposed? And so when you think about it, there's a lot of work here in terms of defining the performance metrics, right? Configuring the monitoring tools, doing routine collections, figuring out how to separate the signal from the noise with alerting and root cause analysis, and then remediation and improvement. But more importantly, there's InfoSec risk. If we don't ultimately understand and see the ongoing trends in these applications and the storage that's tied to them, we may miss something. We may miss a breach, which in essence would present significant business risk. We can also miss that by having alert fatigue, just having too many alerts.
Always.
Right? Back in the days of what we used to call SMS before, SMS became messaging.
Yeah.
But how do we kind of clean this up? How do we get to the past the signal, really, or past the noise to the signal? And if you look at what's happened and what Pure's been doing with both Pure One and proactive notification, this is core business for us.
It is.
We've gone through billions, if not now trillions of points of telemetry to not only understand what's going on and why it's going on, but understand what other customers it might be impacting and getting those alerts to them before it becomes a problem for them.
Yeah, it's really the key. I think you keep saying the term getting the signal out of the noise, because you can become overwhelmed with too much data. And again, back to, the JD and Andrew conversation I had, I used the analogy of my son pitches, he plays baseball, and they have setups now at the field where there are anywhere from 16 to 32 cameras that can film while you're throwing, and then you can segment by every situation in the game. What was the count? What number batter was it? What pitch did you throw? And I asked the coaches about allowing players exposure to this data, and they said, oh no, that's for us. The last thing we want to do is have a player get fully overwhelmed with too much data. And so really it's about the focus on what are those things that actually matter that we can expose from the storage layer that we can provide, whether it's InfoSec, whether it's performance and monitoring. And for me, when I look at the people element into it, it's also about exposure, right? We want to have the data at our fingertips as that admin, so that when something does go wrong, we know where the problem actually lies. And we're getting the phone call and I go, no, it's not us. I think it's over here, but we limit the exposure.
Well, it's super valuable because that number one point of exposure is what I like to call emergency configuration. Right? Somebody goes in, it's a Sev1.
Yep.
They go in and make a change. Maybe the change solves the problem at that point in time, but weeks later, it's like, oh, I left that door open. I did it only so that we can continue to conduct business, but now I've got a security exposure because that door has been left open beyond when it should have been. So to your point, actually understanding what do I need to do to resolve the problem, getting the quickest root cause analysis, being able to then close or deal with that issue and make sure that it's in line with ongoing standards. Remember, this is all about minimizing risk. By driving a more efficient process and reducing risk, I fundamentally change the way workflows operate within my environment.
And I think there's a risk reduction element that comes from reducing the number of screens people have to look at as well. I think about this aspect of management and monitoring, and there's that whole swivel chair, okay, I'm on this screen, I'm on that screen, I'm on this, like, where is it? And for years and years, people have used that term, single pane of glass. Okay, has it ever really worked in reality?
The mythical,
I don't know. The mythical
pane of glass, yeah.
Right? The ethereal single pane of glass. But at least from what I look at, what we deliver with our platform, right? There is a central place where you can go and see that. And guess what? Better yet, we can get insights based on the data points that we pull across the entire fleet that's deployed globally.
Yeah, it's huge. And we talk a lot about data quality as it relates to AI and analytics. Here's what I really love about Pure One. Right now, the most accurate data that we can build into AI models is machine data.
Yeah.
Because there's no context with machines. They're just reporting it as it is, right? The actuator is spinning at this particular rate. There's been this many cars that have passed. And so when you look at our collective decade-plus experience of gathering telemetry data, we take our customers away from this maze of, I'm going to put, I'm going to put a data collector to look at all the telemetry, and then I'm going to build my own dashboard so that I can. No, you don't have to do that.
Yeah, we got it covered. We got a dashboard.
And by the way, it's a little bit, it really kind of builds into this community or this community platform concept that says you're giving your telemetry, and in return, you're getting access to tens of thousands of other arrays that are actively giving telemetry that ultimately, as a platform, makes everybody's environment better.
And that's where the assessments came in too. I mean, that was one that stood out at Accelerate last year and just this year about the types of things that we're now doing with the security assessment and the VM assessment, right? Like being able to go in and then use a Copilot-y type of thing where you ask questions, but then seeing how and where you rank versus your peers.
Huge.
Not named by name, but knowing, so that peer is doing these things, and if we go improve there, then our security posture as a whole, back to your InfoSec, I see a common theme here, our InfoSec overall will get better because we can see what others in our industry and peers are doing, all based on machine data, where there's no interpretation.
That's right. That's right. And I'm really, really bullish on Pure's advantage here as it relates to the amount of machine data that we've captured. Because ultimately, the good thing about telemetry and machine data is if you find a pattern, you're essentially solving a problem before it ever occurred.
Yeah.
And the biggest frustration in support incidents for customers is when they don't get a root cause analysis. It's like, you solved my problem, but I don't really know what happened.
Yeah,
Let's just all hope it doesn't happen again.
Right.
And that's very scary because how do you want to sleep at night knowing, well, it just happened and it could happen again and they didn't tell me what happened? So at Pure, we've really prided ourselves on getting to root cause analysis, but then going one step further, saying, okay, we solved it for that customer. We know the pathology that caused it. Now can we go back and look at all the other customers that have a similar environment and actually proactively tell them that might happen, and therefore they should take this particular step?
Yeah. And eliminate risk of downtime, eliminate risk of business disruption, all those things, because we can see that pathology. It's super powerful. We've always said proactive and predictive support, which is unique. Okay, number 3, and this is one that we love talking about here, right? I remember slides that I loved when I started here that had a picture of a forklift with a circle and a line through it, but it still applies today, right? No forklift upgrades, but really it's all about refresh cycles. You do have to refresh. You gave that example of that joke of 3 years, 1 year to get it working, 1 year to make it run, 1 year to plan what the heck are we going to do? What the heck are we going to actually do next? But it is really important when you take it another level and say the upgrade and the refresh cycle is about keeping the business running, but also making the business better. You've invested time into making these workflows run that support applications. Why should there be disruption? Why should there be downtime? Why should there be outages? This one's huge. And I bet you heard from a lot of customers who are very, very passionate around
this is painful.
Yeah.
We always like to joke on the vendor side that it's painful to respond to RFPs. Sometimes we forget that it's actually painful for our customers to write them, painful for our customers to evaluate them. This is yet another example. Forklift upgrades were just the way it was. This is just the way it went. This is the way life was. And if you were an IT or storage person, you knew that Thanksgiving weekend or Christmas or New Year's, that those were the only outage windows you were going to get.
That's about it.
And so you worked because everybody else was off. And you dealt with it because it kind of just went. It's kind of like being a paramedic. You're going to be busiest when people are out partying, which is typically when you'd like to be out partying, but it's just not going to be. It's not going to be a great holiday for you. So our customers broke it down for us and said, just doing an inventory capacity review. Do we need an upgrade? What kind of upgrade do we need? Do we need the same capacity we had before? Do we need more? Then going through this whole budget and vendor evaluation. I can't stress enough to the vendor community listening, as much as we kind of groan at the amount of effort to respond, our customers have a tremendous amount of effort to build these RFPs and score them.
Yeah, review,
etc.
Evaluate, right.
Then I got to go deploy the system without disrupting the network. I have to make sure I'm in compliance of all existing security standards. Then I got to move all my data across, make sure I don't lose any data along the way, or corrupt any data along the way. And then I have to cut over and decommission the old gear. Something often also not thought about So, okay, well, I have the old gear. Maybe I'm running it side by side. Maybe it's going to take a few months or weeks to migrate. But then I got to take it out of the rack. By the way, some of the stuff's pretty heavy and requires more than one person. I got to put it in a box. I got to put the box on a pallet. I got to get the pallet to my loading dock. And then I have to go figure out how to get this back to the vendor.
Yeah.
And if I don't send it back to the vendor, I might incur penalties. Getting back to death by 1,000 cuts, these are things that come with forklift that you don't think about necessarily, but put a lot of undue pressure and pain and risk on an organization.
I was just blessed with a free upgrade to new cable equipment. Won't say which vendor, but
For your home.
yeah, for my home, and went because I still haven't cut the cord because I'm old enough that I just like having it work. Not messing around with apps on smart TVs that sit and spin forever like I did this weekend with my son. But I was sent new equipment. And I didn't really have a choice, right? I went through some menu that just popped up and it said, oh, you want this programming, you need 4K, we're going to send you new stuff. Okay, well, one of the boxes worked fine. The other didn't work. And that was after I already unboxed it, installed it.
You're halfway through.
I had the whole thing in, and I ran into some kind of loop in the software. Had to take it all back out, put the old box in. It worked. But now I have to go return the equipment, right? Under threat of penalty of extra fees and licensing, and other things. And I'm a little annoyed, right? And so this is what every company out there is dealing with when they go through one of these updates is what do you do with that equipment? And wouldn't there be a nice solution if you could just take what you have and non-disruptively update it and use what's there and just make it better?
Well, and I want to push on this one a little further because even if I take the hardware equation out, let's say that's every 3 to 5 years,
Sure.
and I focus on software, for many, many years, if not decades, these enterprises were calling their vendor, were making an appointment during downtime for a technician to come into their data center with some sort of USB stick or USB drive to apply a firmware software upgrade. And if it failed, they rolled it back.
Yeah.
And they might be there all weekend. Why not move that to self-service upgrades?
Sure.
Right? And that's exactly what Pure did, where the majority of our customers now, on the event of a software upgrade, where you get access to all the latest features, part of Evergreen Forever, right? In terms of really seeing, and that Evergreen model, seeing all software being included, but it's self-service.
Yeah.
So you go in and you say, I'd like to upgrade this array. And not only is it done non-disruptively, there isn't a single human that has to step foot in your data center, including you.
Yeah. It certainly solves for a lot of the synchronization too, right? When we talk about some of the issues that we're doing here, I wrote down notes to myself, think about all the different business groups and people that need to be pulled in and contacted. Okay, fine, it's over Thanksgiving or it's Christmas or it's New Year's, but it's not just the storage team. It's not just the infrastructure team. Right, if that update's going on because there are app services relying upon that data. And so, if you are running the ERP that relies upon that data or you are running the HCM
your team's there,
or whatever,
and the networking team's there, and the security team's there, and everybody's waiting, and everybody's frustrated.
Yeah, and you get teams of tens of people that maybe have to come and do that, and we can just eliminate that. It's huge from the people equation.
Yeah, I've been incredibly impressed by how quickly self-service upgrades have become the status quo at Pure. I mean, it was only 2 years ago that we brought the ability to not only do these non-disruptively, we've been doing that forever.
For a long time, yeah.
But do them on your own without any individual Pure tech having to gain remote access to your account.
Yeah.
And SSUs, the self-service update, is ultimately a game saver. For our customers, because I'll say it again, not only do we not have to enter their data center, they don't have to enter their data center.
Lights out.
Yeah.
Lights out data center. I always love that term. Number 4, let's hit it. Data life cycle, and really here we're just talking about how long do you retain the data? How do you ensure data integrity? How do you do backups, business continuity? It's all those different things. I bet the stats are great for this one.
Well, look, the problem always here is the way it used to be was you set up your workload, you configured your workload, and then you talked to the data protection team about how they were going to protect it.
Yeah, it was a bolt-on.
Yeah.
almost,
Now,
right?
back in the day, it was keep all data forever,
Yep.
indefinitely. But the reality is, there actually is, data classification policies that determine how long I'm going to keep certain data. Healthcare for the life of the patient, engineering of a building, maybe 100 years. Day-to-day data, I may not want to have beyond 2 or 3 years. Right? In the case of discovery, if I don't have it because my data classification policy didn't mean I had to have it, then I want to delete it as quickly as I can. But ultimately here, this has to do with how do I automate the topology of the protection of that data along with the creation of the workload. So getting back to recipes and automation and fusion, how do I make sure that when I'm deploying that workload, I'm eliminating a lot of the manual steps that existed before, and I'm actually creating that data lifecycle management policy at the time that the workload is deployed. So very specifically, what rules does that workload follow? Those rules are hardwired into the configuration of not just the volume and not just the applicability of the storage, but how often it's going to be backed up, what it's going to be recovered on, how many copies of that data are kept, potentially what additional scans are done on that data. Then I have to actually execute the backup and archive, but it's done according to the standardization and policies that are in place. Getting back to my earlier point, if I have 7 different admins or 700 admins, it's not whatever that person chose. It's hardwired into the blueprint of the application, right? What that does is it gives me the integrity to know that it's followed policy. And eventually, when I dispose of that data, I know that the data that was on that volume is now disposed according to standards that are there. This is big.
It's huge.
Right? If data is the lifeblood of the business, I don't necessarily know if it's the new oil or the old oil, but if it's the lifeblood of every business, then the classification of that data and what AI models or data pipelines that data is allowed access to need to be fundamental to the creation of the volume in the first place.
But if this is all being done manually prior to what we can do, you have fragmented policies everywhere, right? If you have different groups that are deploying to support different workloads or different applications, I mean, yes, I guess from a corporate level, tops down, you can say, these are our policies, but come on, there's going to be subtleties and differences among different groups.
100%. Everybody's going to set it up differently.
Yeah.
And, sometimes the application doesn't match the underlying topology. So if I give you an example, on the Portworx side of the business, we've had quite a lot of success with Portworx Backup or PX Backup. Why? Because Kubernetes is awesome. Microservices are incredible. But ultimately, can I connect which microservice is using which volume on which storage array to deliver a particular service? And am I backing up all the appropriate volumes? Do I have the RPO and RTO on every one of those volumes so that in the event of a disruption in my container environment, I can actually go and recollect all those pieces of data and essentially recreate them? What's happening here is you're saying at the time of creation, I will follow the blueprint, I will follow the topology of the applications that require that tier of service. Therefore, no one has to come and vacuum up all of this backup and recovery and data management behind the scenes.
Which also would make, I assume, compliance easier, right? If you have that
100%.
centralized governed policy, as opposed to having to try to manage compliance across different fractured environments, you're just saying, yeah, these are our classification and our policies, so we can hit compliance much more easily.
Well,
from that.
imagine how much easier it is for an IT team to tell their compliance team, no, all of the data classification is done at the time of the instantiation of the volume. There is no human that is going and assigning those privileges. It is all according to our policy. And then based on policy, I can actually tell you which volumes are following which policy. That automated reporting could save weeks of work.
Easily. Love it. Last one here. And this one, for me, when we're looking at cloud integration and mobility, and you kind of mentioned cloud a little bit at the outset, but for me, I look at this as how do we optimize the access and the utility of the data, right? How useful is it, but also to get to a certain point, to get to more efficiency, data locality, things of that nature. What did you discover from customers around, the cloud integration pieces and being mobile with the data?
Yeah, so first and foremost, I keep reading this stuff every week about how, everybody's repatriating from the cloud.
Yeah.
The reality is the cloud's just another operating environment.
Yeah.
And what hasn't changed are the basic laws of data gravity that basically says my data will sit closest to the applications that need to use it. And until we break the laws of physics or time and space, and we allow ourselves to communicate from a remote site as quickly as we can through fiber directly connected within the data center, that's going to be the fact. So what that means is I'm going to use the cloud because I'm going to build applications in the cloud that then generate and use data that's also going to sit in the cloud. But how do I extend my data environment? How do I extend the fundamental standards of how I assign data and classification policies to the cloud? This is big because when I think about how I move data from on-prem to the cloud, how I manage data, how I secure data, how I protect data, today there's a lot of one-offs going on, right? Customers are building up an environment in AWS or Azure or Google or otherwise. They're setting up native volumes on cloud primitives, and then they're trying to figure out how to get this volume on my on-prem array to talk to this volume in the cloud. Well, the good news is we've been doing this for several years with Cloud Block Store.
Yep.
But once again, how do I take this simplicity, the simplicity of Fusion, if I take this blueprinting, this concept of being able to deliver a volume the same way every single time, how do I make that as seamless inside AWS? How do I make that as seamless inside Azure? And that's a huge priority for us. And we've already seen customers, major customers on the Cloud Block Store say, hey, this is incredible. I can now get all the efficiency and the intuitive simplicity of Pure inside the confines of the cloud. Not just the efficiency of compression and dedupe and all of that, but actually being able to take blueprints that are configured to be deployed on-prem and being able to use those blueprints to configure inside the cloud. And so this concept of multi-cloud data services really comes to life and allows customers to get the best of Purity on cloud-native infrastructure.
Yeah, and I think those are the two important distinctions, right? It's not so much that we created something that was a capability that allowed it to work, but one, we allow it to work at the same levels of efficiency, right, that you get when you're deploying on-prem, but number two, to be able to work with consistency, right? To have that consistent experience, again, forget about the capabilities, so that it's just going to feel the same regardless of where you're doing it. It doesn't really matter, again, on-prem, cloud.
That's right. It's just a different operating environment.
Yeah.
But you want to use the same standards. You want to use the same telemetry. You want to use the same processes. And what that does is it drives the optimization of workflow across that entire space.
Yeah, which is what it's all about. Well, I want to wrap it. We'll put a bow on it. We've been hitting some of the Pure aspects throughout, which is great, helping to provide the context, the solution to the challenges. But let's maybe put it all together. We've hit platform a little bit. Certainly, when we've been talking a lot of these aspects, we could say this is really a part of what we do for helping customers realize an enterprise data cloud, an EDC, based on the Pure platform. But I love sort of the going from to sort of methodology, like all these challenges that are on the left side that are the from. What does it look like then as the to?
Yeah, so let's do exactly what you said. Let's vacuum it up on that. So when we talked about provisioning and resource allocation, what our customers told us was in the old world, it was manual volume creation, complex provisioning, one-offs, right? With recipe books, and it was documented, but you need to go find the red binder and then go configure according to these standards. With Pure's Enterprise Data Cloud, we're moving to rapid provisioning with APIs and UIs. It's automated. It's blueprinted. It's done the same way every single time. With performance management and monitoring, our customers told us that they had multiple tools and dashboards. They were doing a lot of exports, right? They were using Prometheus and others to gather logs. They were building their own dashboards and a lot of manual tuning to really get past the noise and really just isolate the signal. Here we're looking at a unified management console with Pure One, where you're not only getting the AI insights from your own telemetry, but you're getting the collective goodness of the other arrays that Pure has in production around the world. With upgrades and refresh cycles, we talked a lot about forklift upgrades. We talked about unpredictable costs. We talked about incredible risk. really moving to completely 100% self-service, non-disruptive hardware and software upgrades with predictable subscriptions, knowing that you're going to get whatever's in that next Purity version without any incremental cost, and you're going to get it without any disruption to your business. Then we moved to data lifecycle management, backup, compliance, recovery. And our customers really told us they were, moving from a fragmented policy with painful and limited compliance, specifically the reporting that was demanded of them, to centralized policy controls with automated compliance checks and real-time analytics for data use. And then last but not least, we talked about multi-cloud. We talked about our customers having to struggle with separate tooling for each deployment in each separate cloud, and how are they going to do this at scale, to the enterprise data cloud, where they essentially now have this seamless data plane with native hybrid integration and 100% unified API-driven approach. So this EDC, this enterprise data cloud that supports and delivers towards the platform model that's now been recognized by Gartner, is not just another box.
Yeah.
It's fundamentally changing the way our customers evaluate their storage and data estate and look for a way to give themselves significant process optimization for scale into the future.
And also transforming the way they operate and do business, right? This is going to be faster time to market. This is going to be meeting risk, meeting compliance. And I love this one too, right? Where there's sort of this vision of an autonomous operating environment, right? Where you really can focus on what the business needs and get out of the weeds of technology, of hardware stuff.
Yeah, and I think when we talk about autonomous, everybody kind of gets a little bit, it's like, wow, this is really scary.
Yeah.
And if I think of where we are with autonomous driving, remember, this is an evolution, right? We think about the storage gets smarter and smarter, and we keep, as humans, we tell it what we need it to do at a certain point to respond to it, and it learns. But if we think of where we are today, yes, we have full autonomous driving in some particular situations, and we even have taxis that are moving with Waymo and others to actually deliver fully autonomous taxis. But in most cases, for the average person, we're now very comfortable that the car tells us that there's something we're not seeing.
Yep.
There's a pedestrian. There's another car. You're in the wrong lane. Something bad has occurred. And I think you're going to see more and more of that come into storage and infrastructure, where I will tell you what's going on as soon as I see it. You will tell me what you would like to do to resolve it. I will go take that action. Mm-hmm. And eventually, I'll be smart enough in the coming years, in the coming decades, to actually take that action on your behalf and confirm back to you that I took the action that you asked me to take because it was exactly the same as what had happened 6 weeks ago or 6 minutes ago. This is what fundamentally process optimization does. And I want to tie it back to AI, because if you think about where this ends up, it's human plus machine. Mm-hmm. The machine is incredibly good at sending and analyzing data. The human is really good at interpreting context and figuring out the appropriate action to take. And so this future of taking what Pure's already learned in the telemetry that we gathered through our history puts us in a unique position to bring this human plus machine equation to life.
And I think people are more comfortable with that, at least right now, right? As we're starting to learn how to use these different features and capabilities is the human plus machine, right? And I've had a rental car the last month because I got into a car wreck. My car's a little older, right? So I have these new capabilities exactly like the ones you talked about, right? I'm backing out of a spot in the garage here.
Yeah, do you trust your camera?
I get the vibrating steering wheel and the little arrow on the thing, and I'm like, okay, that's most of the time I see it. What about the one time that I don't? And so that is a very good human plus machine. It's not taken over for me, but it's giving me that indication.
I love that you brought that up, because I can look in my rearview mirror.
Sure.
I can make sure there's no one there. But you know what the car does? It looks around the corner.
Yeah.
So actually, the amount of times my car has stopped itself because there's somebody coming down that parking lot that I don't see.
Yeah.
Usually at, that big box retailer that has famous parking lots that are super, super busy.
Oh, that one. Right. Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like, I'd never see that.
No.
Right? I'm actually happy you took control, because I would have backed out.
Yeah.
And that's exactly where we're going to go with storage.
Where we're getting to
And I'm
here.
super, super excited. And I'd encourage, the audience out there to bring us in. Let's talk about some of these processes in your environment. Mm-hmm. everybody's numbers are different. Different people have different levels of maturity across each of these processes, but we want to have that discussion with you. Because ultimately, if I'm going to look at a platform and I'm going to look at modernizing a platform, I got to have a whole heck of a lot more value than just another box.
Yep. Yep. I agree. Well, that was a good bow to put on it right there. We may just wrap with that. I like it.
Yeah, it's it's. I always like to say, think beyond the box.
Mm-hmm.
Think outside the box.
Think beyond the bun.
Oh yeah,
That's that.
oh yeah.
That one too.
Well, you had McDonald's slogans last week, so there's no reason
I
you can't
know.
bring another.
Yeah, it's the pop culture things. No, it is think beyond the box, right? And that's really where we are with this platform concept, with the enterprise data cloud becoming reality and the capabilities that we continue to invest and put in, and largely because we are hearing customers, we're listening to these types of challenges, and it's not. It's really hard to deploy LUNs, or, my data migrations are hard. It's we've got to stay competitive, and we got to go deploy new apps and new services because we got to compete. How can you help me do that faster and have better time to market by improving the way that we manage data with your platform?
Yeah, and remember what I started off the episode with. It's death by 1,000 cuts.
Yeah.
This isn't something that shows up on one line item or one PO or one weekly review. It's the fact that you're doing some of these things hundreds, if not thousands of times. And it's that multiplicity of inefficiency that is actually grinding the business to a standstill. But getting some visibility to what that could look like, being able to present a process modernization view to your CIO or CTO is going to bring that to life, as opposed to, I know we're inefficient, but I can't put my finger on it.
Yeah.
I can't express it. Well, let me tell you, it's not the box.
Yeah.
It's the process around the box. And that's fundamentally what we are changing, and we are committed to continue to change. And I do think if you look at not just what's happening within Fusion and the EDC, but also what's happening with Evergreen One, where we're changing the operating model of how you consume storage, Pure has been and will continue to be a leader in the space for many, many years to come.
Yeah. Well, and it changes the conversation, right? As a closer, right? We're no longer talking about bits and bytes and capabilities. It's what does your business need? And that's where EG1 shines and where these other capabilities come in as well. It's a very exciting time.
Sure is.
Mr. Rosmarin, where can people find you? I know you're very active on LinkedIn, so I would definitely check him out there. Always some good and interesting, provocative things that you're thinking out loud there.
Yeah, you can find me online. You can find me in Vancouver. You can find me at one of our next Accelerate events coming up in October. I'll be keynoting our event in Paris, France.
Beautiful.
In line with the events that are operating in Germany and Amsterdam and all across Asia. So very much looking forward to interacting. And thank you again for having me on the show.
Let me know anytime you're in town. We'll do it again. There's always something fun and interesting to talk about with you, and I do appreciate it. And folks, go back and find some of the old audio episodes with Sean too. They are evergreen, to say the least. There's always something there that you can get nuggets from. They are timeless. So appreciate that. Appreciate you coming. Appreciate you listening and watching this episode of the Pure Report podcast. As always, tell a friend, tell a colleague, and share these out. And we will keep the great guests like Mr. Sean Rosmarin coming on to the program. And with that, we will wrap for Pure Storage, for Sean Rosmarin. This is Rob Lumen saying, don't look back. Something might be gaining on you.